Welcome back to the Powered by Football podcast, your favourite Power Chair football podcast hosted by Jackson Taylor. On today's episode, we don't have a matchday roundup for you, as I mentioned in last week's episode, because there was no matchday to round up on the weekend. So instead, I thought I'd bring to you a bit of a different kind of episode. We're going to be having a little Q&A, which I asked you guys to send in some questions, and you definitely did deliver. So we're going to go through with those today. Yeah, you know what? Let's just get straight into it. Firstly, we have a question from Tom Byrne, who says, what are my early predictions for the club championships? Now, my lawyers have informed me to say that I'm contractually obliged to say the Western Sydney Wanderers. So yeah, we are going to win it. No, but in all actuality, I think Newcastle are a really, really strong team, and I think as long as no one gives them COVID again, I think they're a shoe-in to win it. Ignore that coughing. And then, secondly, we have another question also from Tom Byrne, who comes in and says, what are my thoughts on some of the other Australian leagues besides the New South Wales comp? And I hate to say this, but in all honesty, I do not pay enough attention to any of them, to be quite honest. If you want to help me get into it, I'm really open to it. I want to learn more, but I'm quite narrow-minded at the moment in the New South Wales comp, and I know a lot about that because I made a podcast about it, but I'm not as aware. I mean, for those who don't know, I played with Brisbane City, because they had an opening and I didn't have an opening anywhere else, and I was, 13, 14, and they had a slot for me to go in and play with them in a national comp, and I think that really helped me grow, and gave me a massive boost, and now I'm getting first grade minutes, so I feel pretty happy with it. But as far as I'm aware, the Brisbane City side are no longer competing in the Queensland comp, which is sad. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that or anything, to be quite honest, but yeah, I just thought I'd give you that brief sort of discussion just so that you all have my knowledge of what I do know about the other Aussie leagues, and it is very little. And then now I'm going to insert the audio clip here because it's funny. 500 downloads. Hell yeah. This is from my dear brother, Jet Taylor, who says, why do you say 500 downloads so slowly in the announcement video? So we're going to go into a little bit of an editing chat here. There's a lot of production work that goes into this podcast, and a lot more than most people sort of think goes into a podcast. So obviously I had to make that graphic, that animation, and the audio for that. The animation I probably would have spent, like the new episode animation, I would have spent an hour and a half on just trying to perfect it. Like, if I did it now, I could do it a lot faster, but I think just exploring my creativity on there took me a lot longer. And then obviously getting the 500 downloads adjustment, I knew that I wanted the animation to be shorter than the 10-second clip that I post every week for a new episode. So I shortened it down to about 6 seconds so that the confetti would all fall off the screen by the end of it and still look realistic. And I found that, I had to stretch out my 500 downloads. Hell yeah. To fit in to that time frame. So that's why I set it a bit longer. Let's just go on a tangent a bit more about making this podcast. So I edit on a software called Adobe Premiere Pro, and in that software I basically just use OBS Studio to record the podcast. I then import it into Premiere Pro. I then basically just cut out all the really bad stuff. If I say a bunch of ums and ahs, or even if there's dead space, we cut out all that. I use some of the AI tools in there to help clean up audio. That's all I use AI for, though. I do the rest of the work myself. And then once that's done and I review it and I make sure it's as good as I think I can get it, I upload it to a website called rss.com. And on that website, I basically just put in the title, the description, and the episode number and the season number, which I just say is season 1. And then I put in the file with the MP3 of the podcast episode, and then I schedule it for midnight Australian Eastern time to be uploaded on Tuesday mornings, and then I'll just wait, and then it gets uploaded. The following morning, I'll go online, I'll post a little new episode out now posts on social media, which you'll see. And yeah, that's the sort of basic overview of how I do this little podcast. And another question we have here from Michael Suffield, who says, who's your power chair football idol / mentor? It's a big question. I think, it's difficult. And I think I would say the one that I've sort of most recently, looked at as an idol would be Pete Winslow, who plays in the American side, who, got third in the World Cup here in Australia last year. I had a chat with Pete at the World Cup, and he's a champion bloke doing journalism, I believe, at the moment. He's an absolutely awesome guy, and just the way that he plays and some of the set pieces that American squad was doing, and yeah, I'd say, Pete Winslow. There's obviously a bunch of other people too. Even in my own side, I've played with Ben and Andy, Ben Key, Andy Waite for a few years now, and having those two guys with such experience has been absolutely amazing to work with. And then, there's a bunch of other people. I don't want to just go listing every person under the sun, but those are the ones that I think deserve a mention right about now. So yeah. All right, we are back. Sorry if the audio sounds a bit different. We have had a jump in the timeline, I guess. So you are now blessed with the presence of Jackson from the future. And the next question we have is technically written by me, but suggested by my mother, Leah Taylor, who says to make a prediction, either for yourself or the Wanderers as a whole, that will happen by the end of the season. What's your prediction? Firstly, touche. Fair enough. It's pretty good that you thought of turning that back on me. And onto the prediction itself. So currently, I have 3 clean sheets so far this season. I'm first in the comp in reserve grade. I think I'm going to win it. I think I'm going to get the most clean sheets out of any player in the comp, to be completely honest. I'm usually quite humble about all that, but you know what? I've started to get a lot more confident with my defending, and I think, why not? Let's go for it. So yeah, and I think just, we've got a strong defensive team. Me and Jonathan Reyes has been going really, really well in defense. And when we've had other players defending, Jesse Eze, Julian Pereira, they've all been going really, really well. And even having, young players like Levi Carrera up front, he's been going amazingly. Even though he hasn't had much experience in defense, I think if we all work together as a team, as a cohort, I can get my name on that. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how my team goes. The next question, which is it's a big one I've talked about a lot in real life, because I talk to a lot of people about this sport because I love it. And it's, what is your history with power chair football? It's a long one, and I think I asked this in an interview I did a while ago with Daniel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty extensive, and it's really interesting, I think, because I would have started around 10 years ago, and before that, I didn't really have a sport. My mum wanted me to sort of get into a sport, compete, do something like that. I was playing bowling, and I was driving into the ramp that you put the ball on, and it was boring. I was really good at it, but it was boring. So, my mum found power chair football, and the one issue, I guess you could say, was that, there were some amazing people playing there, but there was no way for new people to start playing the game. My mum came to them and was like, hey, I've got an idea for you. So I will promote the sport. I'll get the word out. I'll do all that. I'll make sure that everyone knows about this sport and that we can get some kids in who have potential. You just have to train them. And that's what they did. We've had so many players coming through. We've got, the Sydney FC team is almost entirely filled with players who've come through since we've started that development program, which is now the SAP program. And, we've had players like Ryan Seck who've had experience with Australia, and he started through that program. So I think it's just the fact that we've gone from that, where we had, no way for kids to start, to having kids getting so much exposure, is brilliant. And I was along for the ride the entire time. The question was, what's my history in the end of the day? And I was along for the ride. I wasn't growing as fast as some other people, to be completely honest, but I'm getting there. And I think, at the moment I'm getting my first grade minutes and stuff, but I grew a lot too, and I joined the Wanderers a few years ago. They snatched me up to play in the reserve comp. You know, I've been with them ever since. I'm their captain now, and it's really fun. Like I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I just think that you know I don't know where I'd be if my mum didn't go. My kid needs a sport 10 years ago. To be completely honest, you know, if you're listening to this and you've never played power chair football, you've just heard some kid talk about it and interview people for about their predictions, then you know, send your kid in, send yourself in, whatever. Doesn't matter what situation. Just you know, if you have a disability, go for it. Why not? The next question I have, which I also, it's quite related to the previous one, is how has the Powerchair football community impacted you? And I think I touched on it mentioning a few names before, but you know, I've made so many mates in this sport that I wouldn't have met otherwise. They're all living out really far away from me. I've known, you know, countless people who have made an absolutely amazing impact on my life that I wouldn't have met without this sport. And I think not only that, but I get to learn, you know, that sort of, you know, teamwork and, you know, camaraderie that you don't get outside of a sporting environment. And I think learning to work well together with different kinds of people and, you know, of different ages, you know, all stuff like that. It's just amazing. And like, even how I mentioned in the previous question that I captained the Wanderers reserve side, you know, getting to sort of play into that mentor role and help out. As I mentioned before, we've had Levi Carrero start, and he's like, you know, 9 or something, and he, like, you know, he's learning. You know, he's got a lot of potential, and I think I really, really enjoy watching kids like him grow. And I think I just feel like being a captain is just what I'm meant to do, and I get to yell at my team to tell them what to do, and then I also get to help kids grow and make themselves the best version they can be on the field. We've got such a strong community, and at the end of the day, I wouldn't have done this podcast if I didn't know how strong the community was. I did it to highlight how amazing every single person in this community is. The Powered by Football podcast, in a sense, isn't for me, it isn't for anyone in particular, it's the people's podcast. And I'm really happy with how I presented that, I think. And I've got a question from my father, Leon Taylor, who says, where do you see the sport in 5 years? I'm going to give 3 predictions just so that, you know, I can keep it a bit more defined. So the first one, we have a good mate of mine, Ryan Seck. I reckon he'll be playing with Australia in Argentina in the 2027 World Cup. I reckon 100% he will be there. He is already a top player. I 100% reckon he'll be there. And number 2 is one that I've believed for years, and it's just waiting to happen. We've got, you know, one of my best mates, Jesse Eze, is going to be playing first grade minutes within the next 5 years. Absolutely, he will be. You know, he's got one of the best sporting minds I've ever seen, and I think as long as he takes advantage of himself and allows himself to grow in his chair, because he plays a bit differently, once he allows himself to do that, playing with his headrest, obviously, then I think the sky's the limit for him. I think if he does that, Premier League minutes almost guaranteed. And the last prediction I wanted to talk about is, I'm just having a guess here, but I reckon there might be a 6th team in the New South Wales comp in the next 5 years. You know, you never know what's going to happen. We've got so many new people coming in. There's so much more interest in the sport that we might have too many players to the point where we will have to introduce a 6th team. And I think that would just be monumental for the sport, getting 6 teams in, you know, making the league even bigger, bringing more competition, you know, more fight for spots. I think it'd be absolutely amazing. So those are my 3 predictions. And the last question I've got, which is a bit more deep and a bit more introspective, but we're just going to go for it, is, do you wish you had someone doing the podcast with you? This podcast has been a journey, and it's going to continue riding along, and I think it's yes and no. When I started this, I started it with the intent of not only spreading the word and, you know, making people aware of Powerchair football, but as I mentioned earlier, highlighting the Powerchair football community, and I've definitely done that so far. And I'm not stopping. I'm going to continue doing that. This is not a sign that I'm stopping by any sense of the imagination. I think sometimes I do experience a bit of burnout, especially in the writing process because it feels like I'm just watching games, writing over and over. But, when I get to it and I end up finishing it and I read over it, I realize that it's what I love to do. And even if I do experience a bit of burnout, I'm still enjoying it. So I think that it's my baby at the end of the day. This is my creation and I'm really proud of where I've taken it so far. And we're not stopping. I will obviously grab help if when I need it, but this is the Power Chip Football Podcast hosted by Jackson Taylor at the moment. And if I need extra help, there'll be extra help. But right now, it's just me, so I'm sorry if you do not like my voice. Now, that brings us to the end of all the questions that we have. So I'd like to thank every single person who submitted a question for this. It was really, really fun, and we may do it again. I don't know. I might try and fit one in after the season finishes. But yeah, I think this has been really, really fun. And yeah, thanks guys. We're going to go over to the fun call to action stuff that I put at the end of every episode. Oh yeah, see you next week. You can get involved in Power Chair football here in New South Wales as an athlete, coach, referee or volunteer by visiting the NSW PFA website linked below. Our season takes place in Glenwood at the Valentine Sports Park from the 24th of February 2024 to the 6th of July 2024 every Saturday. Contact info@nswpfa.org.au for more information. Just a quick note that the views of this podcast are mine and mine alone. The opinions and thoughts expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the NSW PFA. If you want to get in touch with the podcast, you can follow us at Powered by Football Pod on Instagram, join our Facebook group, Powered by Football Podcast, or follow our Twitter account, Powered by Pod. Thanks for listening.